Okay, so the way people become permanent residents here in the UK, well, it could be on the verge of a massive shakeup. We're diving into a new government proposal that completely rethinks what it means to earn a permanent place in British society. Let's break it down.
And what's driving all this? Well, it really boils down to one staggering number. According to the government's own forecast, a massive 1.6 million people are expected to gain permanent residency, or settlement, in the UK in just 5 years, between 2026 and 2030.
And this chart, wow, it really puts that forecast into perspective, doesn't it? You can see the actual numbers from recent years, and then this huge projected spike. It peaks at around 450,000 people in 2028 alone. And the paper is pretty clear on why this is happening. It says it's a direct result of the record-high migration we saw between 2021 and 2024.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at why the government thinks this is necessary, then unpack their big idea of earned settlement. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of the new rules, see who's affected, and finally, find out what happens next.
First up, let's get into the government's thinking here. Why the big push for such a major change right at this moment?
And this quote from the Home Secretary's introduction really sets the stage. The core argument in the paper is that recent migration levels are the main driver for this reform, describing the situation as not just unprecedented, but also destabilizing.
So, who exactly is making up this huge projected spike? This is where it gets really interesting. You can see skilled workers and arrivals from Hong Kong are big factors, but the largest single group by a long shot? It's projected to be people who came here on health and care visas.
So what caused this shift? Well, the paper points to a really key policy change. You see, before 2020, work visas were mostly for graduate-level jobs, but the current system opened the doors to medium-skill roles, like care workers, which massively expanded the number of people who could come to the UK to work.
And that, in turn, leads to a fiscal argument the paper makes. The median salary for care workers last year was somewhere around £25,000. Compare that to the UK median full-time salary of $37,000. The paper suggests this difference in earnings affects a migrant's overall net fiscal contribution over their lifetime.
Okay, so given that backdrop, what's the government's big idea? What's the solution on the table? Well, they're introducing a whole new philosophy they're calling earned settlement.
At its heart, it's a total shift in philosophy. The paper defines earned settlement as the idea that getting permanent residency isn't just something that happens automatically after a few years. Instead, it's a privilege that has to be actively earned by proving you've made a sustained contribution to the UK.
So let's put that side by side. The difference is pretty stark. Right now, it's mostly a standard 5-year path. The proposed system brings in a new, much longer baseline of 10 years. But, and this is absolutely key, that path can be made shorter or even longer, depending on who you are and what you do.
All right, so that's the big picture. But how would this actually work in practice? How do you shorten or lengthen someone's time to settlement? Let's get into the nitty-gritty.
The whole system is built on what they're calling 4 pillars. Every applicant would be judged on their character, think criminal records, their integration, like English skills, their contribution, which is mainly about economics, and of course their lawful residence in the UK.
In this table, this is where you really see how it could play out. It gives some pretty wild examples of how that 10-year baseline gets adjusted. If you earn over £125,000 for 3 years, you could slash 7 years off and potentially settle in just 3. But on the flip side, claiming benefits for more than a year could add 10 years to your path, and arriving illegally could add as much as 20.
But it's not just about the timeline. There are also some non-negotiable requirements, some boxes that absolutely everyone has to tick. Things like passing background checks, passing the Life in the UK test, proving you have an upper intermediate level of English, and showing you've earned above the personal tax threshold for at least 3 years.
Okay, this is probably the question on a lot of people's minds. Who exactly is this going to affect? And this is a really critical point, and probably a controversial one for many. The proposal is to apply these changes to everyone who is currently in the UK on a path to settlement, but hasn't gotten it yet. That means the rules could literally change mid-game for people already here. Now, the paper does ask for opinions on this, but the starting proposal is no transitional arrangements. Now, that being said, there are some important exceptions to the rule. This wouldn't affect EU citizens with settled status or people under the Windrush scheme.
And, crucially, several groups would keep their current faster pathways, like British nationals from Hong Kong and spouses of citizens on their 5-year path, and people on global talent visas who are on a 3-year path.
But the paper also singles out one group for a potentially much longer path to settlement. For workers in jobs that are below degree level, which remember, includes many people on health and care visas, it's proposing not a 10-year, but a 15-year baseline before any of those adjustments are even considered.
So, with all of these huge changes being proposed, what happens now? Where does it all go from here?
And this is super important to remember. None of this is law yet. Right now, these are just proposals in a government consultation. They're actively asking for public feedback, and that consultation is open until early 2026.
And the consultation goes even deeper. It's asking some really fundamental questions, not just about the timeline. For example, it asks whether access to public funds, like benefits, should be something reserved only for British citizens and not for people who have settled status but aren't citizens yet.
Which, brings us right back to the core idea driving this whole thing. This quote from the Home Secretary really says it all. The view that permanent settlement is a privilege you have to earn, not a right you're automatically given.
So when you boil it all down, this entire proposal really forces a huge conversation. It gets to a fundamental question for the whole country. How should we, as a nation, define what a contribution is worth? And what should the path to truly belonging really look like?